Depression, bleak austerity, economic recession, no prosperity. Then a girl came that made her loaded colour to her brush and painted happy china. She was born with a gun, and her name was Clarice. She was the sunshine and she took the whole world by storm. She was the sunshine girl. She was born. Unique desires her intent. A sense of colour, heaven sent. She was the sunshine girl. It's stories of correspond and foresters are girls. Each Pinterest was a special kind. They were called the bizarre girls. Some say bizarre. There were many kinds of patterns, brokers and gardenia, House of Andalusia, Revel and Taormina, linked geometric, orange, black and yellow. Miss Clarice Clifford was the darling of Art Deco. Call it bizarre or even bizarre. She was a woman that dared to dare. She was yes, showing that she could feel so well. Sense of colour. Set. She was the sunshine God. In Stoke-on-Trent. Born and bred in Stoke-on-Trent. I'm Kate Garner, proud ambassador of the Art Deco Society UK. I am actually in my room getting ready at Fur Island Hotel because I'm doing a show and it will be Art Deco themed, of course. So I thought I'll quickly tell you how I got to become a member of this fantastic society that just keeps giving, and I love it. So during lockdown, I performed a show and it was shown online for the Art Deco Society UK members. And one of the songs that I wrote was about a little bottle of joy by Jean Patou. And there, I'll just zoom it into you, that gorgeous bottle. And this was given to me, this is why it's quite relevant, by Janista, who many of you know, lovely Janista, as a Christmas present. So I'm wearing that tonight, because it's Art Deco, and it still smells good, because it's in the dark bottle with preserves. Can you believe it? All those years ago, it still smells good. So I'm going to go on to do the show now. So I just want to say to everyone in the Art Deco Society UK, a very Merry Christmas. And yeah, I think we're going to have some really exciting times because we are going to be going back and it's centenary year. All the best. Merry Christmas. And now it's my great pleasure to hand you over to our host for the evening, Ruthie Good.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Art Deco Society UK's special Christmas webinar with our speaker Dr. Emma Bastin. We're very happy to have so many of you joining us for what promises to be a fun Christmas evening. I'm Ruthie Good. I'm the events coordinator for the Art Deco Society UK. Before introducing Emma, I'll go over the usual house rules, starting with auto-generated captions, just to let you know these are available if you click on CC Live Transcription at the bottom of your screen, and then click on Show Subtitles. Next, I'll just quickly remind you that this is the Zoom webinar format, which is different from a regular Zoom meeting. So it means you'll only be able to see and hear me and Emma, our speaker. We can't see or hear you, so please sit back and relax and enjoy the evening. As usual, we'll follow up tonight's presentation with a question and answer session with Emma. If you'd like to ask a question or even just make a comment at any point during the evening, just type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. As I've said, do that at any point in the evening. Don't have to wait till the end, and I'll put all your questions to Emma at the end. We had loads of brilliant questions following last month's talk, so please don't hesitate to type in any question. Or you might want to use the chat function just to share your thoughts with the group, in which case feel free to type those as well. And please be respectful, as always, with your questions and comments. If you have any issues with sound or video, you can raise these also by using the same chat function. We have our chair, Lucy, behind the scenes, and she'll be happy to sort out any possible technical glitches. Fingers crossed there won't be any. So I'm now very happy to move on to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Emma Bastin. Emma is a historian of the early 20th century, particularly looking at Britain in the interwar period. She's fascinated by society and culture and has a particular interest in fashion and shopping. She's working on her first book, which is a biography of the pioneering female journalist and Vogue editor, Alison Settle. And she's also, I'm very happy to say, treasurer for us here at the Art Deco Society. So Emma, I can see you've got your camera on already. Everyone else sit back and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me just share my screen with you and we can get underway. So, just a moment. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see my screen now, and me as well, I hope. So welcome to this talk about Christmas in the 1920s and 30s. I've tried to give it an Art Deco flair, but as you'll see, this was a little bit harder than I expected. I have to confess that I am not an expert on any sort of Christmases. I've done all this research for this talk, and I've absolutely loved delving into the archives and into the British Library to find out a lot of this information to bring you this talk. So I hope that you'll find it interesting and enlightening. I should mention that I'm currently away from home on holiday, and I hope the internet is going to stand up to this talk and you can see me and my slides. You can probably also see that I'm wearing a spangly jacket and have a Christmas tree behind me. I also have a cocktail with me to enter into the festive spirit. My cocktail is actually called a French 75 or a 75, and it was created just before the First World War, and it's a champagne and gin concoction with lemon and sugar, although I have to say that I have swapped the champagne for Prosecco because I'm just not that posh. So the first thing I need to say about looking at Christmas in the 1920s and 30s is, hopefully not too disappointingly for most of you, is that it's based a lot around traditions. And of course, it still is today. This is mainly down to one man, Charles Dickens. In the early 1800s, it's sort of hard to believe today, but Christmas was sort of falling out of fashion. It had become a fairly sedate one-day affair without much celebration. Charles Dickens wrote A Christmas Carol and it was published in 1843, and it was a huge success. And when Dickens was writing this, he was looking to reinvigorate Christmas, and he wanted to reintroduce some of the extravagance and feasting and goodwill that had been seen in the Tudor and medieval periods. So Britons were introduced in A Christmas Carol to old traditions such as feasting and carols, but they were also introduced to new ones such as Christmas trees, which Dickens borrowed from Queen Victoria and Prince Albert. So as well as a traditional Christmas, we also have a lot of nostalgia when it comes to Christmas. It's been said that actually most children don't remember individual Christmases. They morph together memories of all of their Christmases to create the Christmas that they then pass on to their children when they have their own families. So tradition is passed on in this way as well. So when we look at the interwar period in 1920s and 30s, a lot of what we see is based on Victorian, Dickensian, Edwardian, oldie worldy sort of ideas of Christmas. And this illustration is just a very sort of, traditional and nostalgic image to sort of get you in the mood for that. But in the interwar period, we also have time marching on. Technology is changing, attitudes to life are changing. So what we do see is that some of these traditional ideas are being merged with modern ideas to create new ideas of what Christmas should be. So we'll start off by looking at some of the traditions and habits that were in place in the interwar period. And we'll start off by looking at Christmas trees. Now, certainly in my house, the Christmas tree is sort of the main event, was putting it up and having it sat in the house for a few weeks. In the interwar period, Christmas trees were still a fairly minority habit. It's estimated that by the late 1930s, around 4 million Christmas trees were put up a year, which is quite a low number. In 1938, 21 working class families were interviewed by mass observation who sort of questioned people across the nation. And all of them had decorations in these 21 houses, but only 5 of them had trees. I mean, this could be down to the fact that the cost of a tree was prohibitive, but it does show you that not everybody had them. So these are some trees that were out in public, as it were, not in people's houses. So on the left, we have this glorious star-covered Christmas tree at St. Paul's in London. And on the right is, this is a publicity shot from the department store Gamages, showing a girl sat with a Christmas tree and presumably what you could find in store or when you visited Father Christmas. Interestingly, this Gamages Christmas tree actually looks like it's artificial. So artificial trees had been made prior to the interwar period, but out of feathers. In 1930, Addis, the brush manufacturing company, put their machines to a different use and started producing Christmas trees using the bristles, or the brush bristles, as bristles on a tree. I'm told, or I have read, that they were toilet brush bristles, but I don't really know how true this is. So technology sort of advanced from this initial sort of toilet brush Christmas tree, and by the late 1930s you could buy a tree similar to this one on the right in Woolworths for about 6pence, so they were relatively cheap as well. This particular tree has a wonderful story that's been shared with one of our attendees this evening. It belonged to Annie and Albert Burton, who were married on the 2nd of September 1939, just a day before war broke out. And they bought this particular tree that year in 1939. And throughout their married life, their lives, they collected various ornaments to go on the tree. Trees like this are now actually really sought after. So they may have only cost 6pence at the time, but one sold in 2023 for £2,600, almost identical to this one. I'm happy to say that this particular tree is going to stay with its owner, along with all the ornaments that were collected over the years. And I think she's incredibly lucky to have it. On your Christmas tree, you might want to put some lights on it to make it gleam and sparkle. At the start of the interwar period, gathering round with your family to light candles on a Christmas tree was still quite popular. But by the late 1930s, electric lighting had advanced, and not many people were gathering round to light candles on a tree anymore. It's rather dangerous. This particular box is actually American. I've tried to keep a British focus on this talk, but this box is so wonderful that I had to include it anyway. It's very modern, and I love that they've also given Father Christmas a new way of travelling. He's sat on his own plane there. These lights also can be used outside. Apparently they're completely weatherproof because they contain rubber gaskets, although I really don't know how safe they would have been. Apart from the tree, you were encouraged to, people sort of decorated their home. So greenery such as mistletoe, holly and ivy were still very popular, although by 1927, a Scottish newspaper reckoned that about half of this was actually fake or synthetic. Tinsel made from aluminium was very popular, as were baubles, paper chains, stars and things like that. Decorations could be homemade, of course, but they were also bought at places in shops, and Woolworths was a very popular destination because everything was less than sixpence, and so it was very cheap. Marks and Spencer's also sold decorations, and again they were aiming at a very low price point. Everything that they sold was less than 5 shillings, and cost a lot less than that. Dressing tables and sideboards became a popular sort of thing to do in the interwar period as well. In 1924, sellers of Christmas trees actually thought that the big tree that stood in your living room, for example, was actually going to completely be removed from at Christmases, and that small tabletop trees would take their place. Women's magazines had a really important role in suggesting how homes could be decorated. These magazines were a sort of educational aid for women to suggest how they could be perfect wives and mothers. And of course, Christmas time is the perfect time to show off all your skills as a housewife. So in this feature, we have apples, which are wrapped in tin foil and used as candle holders with these tall red tapers, with I think it's a synthetic holly wreath behind it, with silver leaves and red berries. And on the right, we have a miniature Christmas tree, which shows how you could create a false one and put candles on it, and also little miniature gifts for children to take away after a tea party, for example. So if you'd finished dressing your home suitably, you may want to go out to a party. And there were any number of social activities to take part in, and Christmas is of course a time of gathering together and celebrating. So in this lovely image from the sketch, 1927, we have a children's fancy dress party in full swing. The sketch was quite an upmarket magazine. It had an upmarket readership. It reported on what society of the day were doing, and we can see this just from the fact that children are decked out in all this extravagant, glorious fancy dress. But also the clothes of the mothers. The lady on the left is wearing a full beribboned skirt made of rose-spotted net, and that cost 8 guineas in Peter Robinson, which was a department store. Just to put that into context, that's about 2.5 weeks' wages for the average worker at the time. We can also see that this is a fairly swanky party from these sort of table decorations that you could just make out in the background. They're made of Christmas crackers, and they were available to order from Woolard's, a department store in Knightsbridge. We have the Horseshoe, a sedan, and the Moulin Rouge. Christmas crackers had already become a part of tradition. They were first introduced by Tom Smith in the Victorian period, and the hats and jokes were very much part of what was expected at Christmas, much as today. So it wasn't just children having fun at Christmas, though. Adults were also out and about and enjoying themselves. There were cabarets and dance parties, cocktail parties. One columnist in the sketch said in 1930 that life was, quote, rendered extra busy by the number of private parties being given for Christmas. So one of the other pastimes that was a huge craze in 1930 was ice skating, which is why I have this quite fun image on the right. It was said to be overtaking dancing as a pastime at one point. In 1925, there'd been no ice rinks at all in London, but by 1930, there were enormous public rinks at Golders Green, Richmond and Hammersmith, and it cost 2 and 6 to go and skate. If you didn't fancy embarrassing yourself like this chap on the right, then you could also watch shows there as well, where professional skaters would show off their skills. For the upper classes who didn't want to mingle with all the hundreds of people on these large ice rinks, there were actually 2 private ice rinks in central London as well, which were run by private skating clubs. Other Christmas things you might want to do is go to Panto. So these 2 ladies on the left were in Peter Pan in 1933 at the London Palladium. You could also, in London, there were various circuses and fun fairs on, and these were held at places like Olympia, the Crystal Palace and the Agricultural Hall. And somewhat surprisingly for us today, greyhound racing was a really popular Christmas pastime. So there were 6 stadiums in London which all offered specific Christmas time races over the period. And it was obviously marketed as very glamorous evening out. So the image on the right is the newly revamped White City Club enclosure from 1932. So this was brand new. You can just see the track in the distance, but I'm not sure whether there'd been much watching going on it, but it does look like a very chic evening out. If you fancied a night at the cinema, then in 1935, you could go and watch the first full-length, all-talking version of A Christmas Carol. It's called Scrooge. It was apparently a polished and first-class British production, and it was suitable for all the family. So once you'd done all these fun things as well, it was time to think about gift giving. Gift giving was not new, but the late Victorian period had really seen a distinct growth in this idea of a gift shopping period from mid-November. By the interwar period, consumerism and gift giving was as integral to Christmas as the religious aspect, to be honest. The middle classes and those working classes who were in continual employment had more money to spend. Family sizes were shrinking, so you could spend more on each individual within your family. And more importantly, there was a growing sense of people felt they deserved a treat at Christmas and a greater sense of materiality. People wanted more stuff, basically. This gorgeous illustration is another one from the sketch in 1925. It's Knightsbridge, and the magazine says that Knightsbridge boasted some of the finest Christmas displays in London. You can't really see the Christmas displays here, but they certainly have a very chic and stylish shopper. Trade journals aimed at retailers encouraged retailers and shops to start selling to consumers early. Not that many of them needed much encouragement. The bigger stores were rearranging their furniture and fixtures and fittings in early November to make space for extra stock and Christmas displays. They also needed to find extra warehousing for all the extra goods they wanted to sell. And they also trained hundreds of staff. It's said that in the festive period, Woolworths trebled the number of shop assistants that they had in stores, which is really quite remarkable. Selfridges justified this long run up to Christmas from sort of early mid-November by saying that people actually enjoyed the experience of shopping for a Christmas gift. And it was, it wasn't just about the day itself. There was a sense of anticipation that you got when you were visiting the shops. Part of this Christmas feeling came from Christmas displays that stores put on, and these were often just a treat in themselves. So children like these were completely enthralled by the displays of toys and gadgets and gimmicks that were put in these in the windows. Illuminated Christmas displays are really hard to find pictures of. I presume this is because they were so hard to photograph, because when they were lit up, the contrast between the light and the dark would have been really quite difficult to capture. So the image on the left, I apologise for the quality, it's taken from the Times, so it's a fairly pixelated original in itself. I think this is Selfridges in 1932, and you can see the row of Christmas trees across the first floor. And it really is making people stop and look. The image on the right is also, I believe, Selfridges, and if you look closely, you can actually see people peering into the windows at the displays. In 1930, I think Selfridges had an electric train which ran the full length of the store as part of their display. This was also fully illuminated. But other stores, of course, were getting in on the act as well. It wasn't just Selfridges running these extravagant displays. So in 1930, which we've already seen, their window display was a Christmas scene with moving mechanical figures in it. It contained 20,000 individual lights, and it was so popular with the public that a judge actually had to issue an injunction to stop crowds gathering, not just on the pavement of Oxford Street, but also the road. Barkers of Kensington used 6,500 lights in their 100-metre long display. And the Lions tea shops, the corner houses, they in 1930 made use of the first neon lighting in window displays. Unfortunately, I've not been able to find a picture of that, but they were definitely moving with the times. If you managed to battle through all these crowds, you might want to actually buy some gifts. The Illustrated London News described the suitable Christmas gift as an elusive quarry. And so guidance for what to buy people was given by the page in newspapers and magazines. Tatler said, for example, that you will find the right gifts if you study the advertisements in the Christmas number of the Tatler. So editorials and articles set out what was in the shops, and there were also adverts. And of course, printing had improved so much in these years that a lot of these things were illustrated, which is great for me because it means I can share some really wonderful images with you. This is also where we start to see a little bit more in the way of Art Deco. So although Christmas was built a lot around tradition, when it came to buying gifts, people wanted to show that they were buying something new. So this often meant things that were modern and newfangled. So here are a couple of really fantastic modern gifts that you could buy. The left is an advert by the General Post Office to buy a telephone. This was apparently the perfect gift for a friend, presumably so you could natter to each other. A plain black version cost £1, but you could double your spend if you like, and you could get a coloured version. The advert on the left give electric presents, because of course electric is becoming more and more common in houses. There are toasters, lights, kettles, and at the bottom, the funny thing with a hook on the end is a car heater, which prevents freezing and allows easy starting. So this is one for the automobile enthusiast in your life. There was a growing emphasis in the interwar period on women receiving luxury gifts. Men were sold the idea that Christmas was the time of year to show appreciation for to the woman in your life who did so much for you throughout the year. So makeup and perfume, furs and clothing were just some of the things that were sold or advertised as good gift ideas. Makeup had become increasingly popular and more acceptable in the interwar years because people were seeing Hollywood stars, for example, make up their faces. So women were not so scared now to put on makeup and put their best face on in public. There are unbelievable numbers of adverts for makeup at Christmas. This is just one that I've selected almost at random because there's so much choice. This is by the French-founded company Coty from 1927, and they have individual items of makeup and fragrance packaged together in these gift sets, which gives them a sort of extra cachet, I suppose. The advert as well claims that these gift sets will be a subtle compliment to the receiver, gay, sophisticated and matching her own charms, and prices ranged from a fairly modest 3 and 6, 3 shillings 6 pence, up to 65 shillings. So they're aiming at a really wide audience here. This lovely perfume advert is from the House of Worth, who were a couturier in Paris. They're really pulling on all of their French fashion credentials here with the French text, and also the fact that they are advertising their perfumes as being available from 2 boutiques in central London, also one in Biarritz and one in Cannes. The eagle-eyed of you amongst you may have noticed though that there is also a wholesale distributor based in London, which means that actually this perfume is far more widely available than simply in these chic boutiques. The advert itself is classic sort of black and white monochrome Art Deco. The bottles themselves are also very modern. They're very stripped back. And the black bottle in particular has these lovely Art Deco etchings or pressings on the glass. However, If you didn't want to buy your wife a luxury gift, Hoover and Eubank were on hand with more practical offerings. Vacuum cleaners and carpet sweepers. Eubank in particular have this brilliant tagline, a Christmas gift every day, presumably so the lucky lady could push her carpet sweeper around the house every day of the year and be reminded what a fabulous Christmas gift she'd received from her husband. Hoover also tried to elevate their Hoover beyond something that's just a practical household object by saying she'll know it's the best. There were loads of examples like this. Other examples I found were obviously things like irons, but also mangles. And much like today, sort of the the views on these gifts was somewhat split. I'm not sure I would really want to receive a carpet sweeper. Men, though, on the whole, tended to receive and expect slightly more practical gifts. Razors, gloves, ties, dressing gowns will all seem to be quite common. Many people, of course, smoked, so tobacco pouches and cigarette cases were popular. And also, judging from the number of advertisements I've seen, just giving cigarettes in themselves was very popular. So on the right, we have these gold flake cigarettes, which are presented in a handsome oak cabinet, also Christmas themed with the holly on, presumably so you could keep the gift box afterwards and use it for something else once you smoke the cigarettes. Even Brill cream was suggested as a gift idea. This set is arranged rather nicely, and perhaps it was the Lynx gift set of the day. I don't know. If you were feeling a little more wealthy or wanted something slightly glitzy, you could go to a jeweler's. This is an advert from the Goldsmiths and Silversmiths company. I have to confess I've chosen this advert because I actually own a watch made by this company, so they're very close to my heart. It's worth zooming in on a couple of the things that were for sale because they're a little bit small, but just look at them in a little bit more detail. So we have a man's signet ring, which is just over £5, and this is again very modern and very Art Deco. We have a modern chromium plate and a glass clock for £10. And for all of these cocktail parties that you may want to host, there were these fabulous silver cherry picks with cherry red tops with a matching stand. I think this is possibly a gift for someone who already has everything, although I do think they are quite fabulous. It's also worth noting that these jewellers were aiming at a fairly wide audience. And you can see this in the adverts. So in this one, we have a cut glass scent bottle, which sells for just over £1. But on the opposite side of the page, we have an emerald and diamond bracelet, which sells for £260. This is more than the average salary in Britain at the time. So it's a really broad range of prices. If we move on to children now, smaller families meant that there was more emphasis on buying children the perfect gift and making them happy. And this wonderful little chap is called Dismal Desmond. He was the best-selling toy in 1926. He started off life as an illustration. He was mascot of the England cricket team and also the women's tennis club at Wimbledon. He's so sad, unfortunately, because his owner, Daisy Dudar, has died, and the more and more sad he gets, the more black spots he gets. He was a howling success, as the poster says, and in fact, a cheerful Desmond was actually introduced, but he was nowhere near as popular and was quickly removed from the range. For the young boy in your life, you might want to buy a Dinky Toy. Dinky Toy was a sort of a subsection of Meccano. They started producing tin press toys in the early 1930s. They were vehicles, so cars, vans, planes, ships. This advert is from 1936, the year that the Queen Mary launched. I thought it was perfect for an Art Deco talk. The advert says that her graceful lines make her the stateliest ship ever. I think that's something that not a lot of Art Deco enthusiasts would disagree with. And here is the item itself in all its glory. It cost £1. You can see it's got its little tugboat in front, and also it gives information about the tonnage and the speed, for example. For girls, dolls' houses had long been a favourite, but most of them were quite traditional. But there was one toy manufacturer, Triang, who were a really big toy manufacturer, who launched a range of what they termed ultra-modern dolls' houses. There were 5 houses in this range. This is model number 50, and they ranged in size. It has metal windows, like the Crital windows that were so popular in the 1930s. A sun trap on the roof allows the owners of this house to sunbathe, as was the latest fashion. And also the double doors on the left is a garage, because no self-respecting ultra-modern owner would be without a car. This house seems to have been renovated. This is obviously the exterior, but on the interior, it's worth having a look as well. This is slightly worse for wear. But you can see the detailing inside. So it has electric lighting, which you can just see in the light shades at the back, and these lovely Art Deco fireplaces. And this, the owner of this house has actually put in some modern furniture, which is in keeping with the house, which I think is really, really charming. A final mention on gifts goes to Marks and Spencer's. They sold everything I've already mentioned at less than 5 shillings. So in 1932, you could buy a chemistry set, an electrical set, a ping pong set, or a full games compendium for 5 shillings. And they also did smaller versions of these for half the price. Again, we've looked at packaging already, and we'll come back to it later. They say, note the attractive packaging. And also it's interesting to note, again, we'll come on to this in a moment, that they're all British made. This, in the 1930s, this was becoming a really important facet of selling, as we'll see in a moment when we come on to food. So food has always been a mainstay of Christmas, or certainly since Charles Dickens set up what would become the traditional festive meal, normally of a roasted bird of some kind, followed by a steamed pudding. In 1936, a female journalist in Woman's Own wrote this lovely phrase: "One just knew that Christmas was the nicest time of year. Plum pudding and turkey in the middle of the day, lounging over the fire in the afternoon with nuts and piles of goodies, and a cold supper to finish." We've got to bear in mind when we're talking about food that food was far more expensive than it is today. It made up a much larger proportion of people's expenditure. So the working class in particular would have to save up for Christmas food, and they would either put money into savings clubs, they would save up their co-op divvy, or they would save at home as well. And this allowed them to buy good things to eat: cakes, oranges and biscuits. There are also numerous comments recorded in various places about people feeling that they deserve a treat at Christmas and to eat nice things. For the middle classes, saving up wasn't so much of a problem. They could almost buy what they wanted at Christmas, and this meant that there was a really big audience for food manufacturers to advertise to encourage people to buy their wares. Chocolate, of course, was a favourite, much as it is today. Chocolate manufacturers made assortment boxes, which were in these gift boxes, which took place of wrapping. Its most extreme, though, Rowntree actually came up with a whole range of different packing ideas. So they started packing chocolate in things like marmalade jars, and even at one point a full tea set where the teapot and the teacups were filled with chocolates, meaning that you could reuse these gifts once the chocolates had been eaten. Going back to more traditional lines of packaging, Cadbury, this is the box on the left that you can see. This is Cadbury's silent theatre box, which allowed cinema and theatre goers to scoff their chocolates in silence and not interrupt other viewers. The McVitie's advert on the right dates from 1933. And again, they mention the packaging of the food, which suggests that you can give these items to friends, family, or hosts as a gift. You can see that the Christmas cracker on this image as well, and also it has some lovely modern serving trays. The mainstay of a Christmas lunch, though, if we come onto the Christmas meal itself, was roasted meat. This was increasingly changing from goose and beef to turkey. The working classes still mostly had a joint of beef, And eating turkey was a growing phenomenon, which grew and it was a middle class phenomenon, and it grew as the number of middle class people grew. One of the key reasons for this was that turkey wasn't eaten at any other time of year, so it marked it out as special. But another really influential factor was the cost of imported turkeys. So these were half the price of a British raised turkey and were incredibly popular. In 1936, Canada alone exported 1 million turkeys to Britain. And in 1938, 2.5 million turkeys were bought in Britain, meaning 1 in 5 households were eating it. Such was the trade in turkeys and Christmas meats generally, that it wasn't just butchers getting in on the act selling these things. The image on the left is a pub in 1923, and you can see that they've got turkeys hung up for sale. This in itself wasn't a new thing. There's actually a book, a Sherlock Holmes story that was published in, 1892, called The Adventure of the Blue Carbuncle, where the main story revolves around the sale of a goose in a pub at Christmas. So, but clearly pubs have moved with the times, and they're now selling turkeys rather than geese. The image on the right is a Leadenhall Market in 1933, and it's almost impossible for us now to imagine meat being sold in this manner. We've just moved on so far from this, but this is actually only 90 years ago. I just think it's a sort of interesting contrast with today. After your turkey, you might want to have a Christmas pudding. Now, the government tried to rebrand this as an Empire Christmas pudding in the early 1930s. The early 1930s were in the depths of a global financial recession, and as such, the British government tried to encourage people to buy British and Empire goods to keep the money sort of swilling around in the Empire pots, as it were. So these images are taken from a booklet produced by the Empire Marketing Board, encouraging people to have an Empire Christmas and buy British food at Christmas, and as such, it's aimed squarely at women. The Empire Christmas pudding was one of a number of recipes in the book, and it was, quote, taken from the King's chef with gracious permission of their majesties. And just to give you an idea of what this contained, I'll have to read this list out, I can't remember it. There were currants, sultanas and raisins from Australia or South Africa, apples from the UK or Canada, demerara sugar from the West Indies, cinnamon from India, cloves from Zanzibar, brandy from Cyprus or Palestine, and rum from Jamaica. Talking of rum or brandy, you might want something to drink with all this delicious food that you're going to eat. In 1932, a drinks importer said that his October to December orders were 3 times that of his January to March orders. So there was clearly a good appetite for alcoholic drinks over the festive period. The interwar period, of course, is synonymous with cocktails. They were a fairly newfangled creation, let's say, rather than invention. And they also signaled that you were sophisticated and modern if you were drinking one. And as cocktails grew in fashion, so spirits began to become more acceptable, particularly things like gin, which had long had a fairly dubious reputation. So on the left, we have this advert from Gordon's, and they're selling this ideal gift cassette, which is a case of pre-mixed gin cocktails. And loads of companies were offering things like this, pre-mixed cocktails. If you wanted to make your own cocktails, though, then again, newspapers and magazines were on hand to tell you what to do. So 1930, the Strand magazine published Christmas cocktail recipes that included the sidecar, champagne punch and eggnog. For those who were worrying about how to tackle these fearsome alcoholic drinks, women's magazines offered advice on how many drinks it was polite to have and how much to eat in order to avoid drunkenness. Some of the drinks accessories that you might require for these beverages were cocktail shakers and wine coolers. These 2 gorgeous items were taken from the old cinema website. The Old Cinema is a shop in Chiswick. They were for sale when I made the presentation. They may have already been snapped up, I don't know. But the centre is a German rocket or Zeppelin cocktail shaker with an integrated strainer. It comes with a corkscrew and various cups and storage jars. And on the the right is a walnut and chrome champagne bucket or cooler made by Waring and Gillow. So in terms of Christmas greetings and messagings, Christmas is a time for keeping in touch and goodwill. So communication is a really important part of that. So we'll start with cards. I found it really, really difficult to find any examples of Art Deco Christmas cards. I think partly this is because Christmas is based on tradition. So there were lots of traditional images, and also the fact that Christmas cards are disposable. Once Christmas is over, people threw them away. So there are examples of Art Deco Christmas cards, so please don't spam me with them afterwards, but a lot of them do tend to be American, and I did want to try and keep a British focus in this talk. But I'm going to mention the Christmas card phenomenon anyway, because it really was a complete phenomenon. These ladies here are working in a factory making Christmas cards. This particular factory came up with 3,000 new designs a year. And a couple of mind-boggling statistics on Christmas cards. In 1923, the increase in festive mail meant that an extra 30,000 postal workers were needed to deal with the volume. And by 1937, 470 million cards were sent in the UK. The entire population at this point was 41 million. And so if we exclude children and babies from that number, it basically means that each adult was roughly sending about 14 cards. Now, I can't imagine my husband writing 14 cards. So some people must have been sending loads and others none, or it really was something that everybody did. The other thing to say about Christmas cards is sending them could be a little bit fraught. So newspapers and magazines actually comment that people found sending them quite stressful because they felt that the sender was judging them on the size and the quality and the cost of the Christmas card that you sent them. Radio, of course, played an important role in people's Christmases. This was an interwar innovation. The first public broadcast was made in 1922 to a very small number of listeners, but by 1939 there were 9 million license holders, and it's estimated that around 35 million people had access to a radio. That doesn't mean you owned one, but they could visit a neighbour or a friend and go and listen to it. Just as today, the Christmas issue of the Radio Times was the best-selling issue of the year. In 1927, it sold 1 million copies instead of the usual 850,000. And I can only imagine that this number increased as more and more people started listening to the radio. This gorgeous cover is from 1936. And in that year, on the radio, Christmas Day, you could have listened to classical music by the London Symphony Orchestra, pardon me, Eugene Finney and his Tango Orchestra, an adaptation of A Christmas Carol, of course, designed for children, and a version of the Nativity. And of course, on Christmas Day, there was the Christmas broadcast. It's been reckoned that around 90% of people who had access to a radio listened in to the King's broadcasts. They started in 1932 with George V doing a live broadcast from Sandringham at 3 p.m. But the 1937 or the first broadcast by George VI in 1937 was so off-putting for the poor nervous king that he declined to do a broadcast in 1938. Unfortunately, by this time, the British public actually thought that the King's speech was part of a British Christmas. And in 1939, because of the outbreak of war and the need to boost morale, he was actually persuaded to do the Christmas speech again. And of course, it's carried on ever since. And there have only been a handful of exceptions. If I am talking about Art Deco in the Christmas period, I have, of course, to give an honourable mention to London Transport. They were one of the most innovative public design schemes in the period, and under Frank Pick, modern art and Art Deco were embraced in a whole host of ways, including Christmas advertising posters. These images are from the archive of the London Transport Museum, and it would have been really groundbreaking when they were first seen. So, for example, we have the traditional colours of red and green, but we also have a blue Christmas tree. The image on the left uses font alone, really, to make its point. There's no image. This was very much based on the new typography movement that was coming out of Europe at the time. And most striking for me anyway, is this rendering of Father Christmas, who's triangular. He's still recognisably Father Christmas, but he's completely different to the images that we're used to seeing of him. And don't forget that these posters were all over the transport network, so they would have been seen by millions of people. And these, seeing these would have really informed people and changed people's ideas about what they thought the representation of Christmas should be. It's also interesting that 2 of these posters explicitly champion a consumer-based Christmas, where shopping is definitely part of the experience, encouraging people to go to shops. So if we move on, I think Father Christmas, or Santa Claus as he was more popularly known in the interwar period, deserves a few lines. He is the star of Christmas, after all, surely. So Coca-Cola, I'm afraid to say, did not single-handedly turn Father Christmas's clothes red. He was already being styled in red before Coca-Cola dressed him in red. It's just that they really popularized it because, of course, they were a global brand and they advertised, fairly global brand, and they advertised everywhere. Santa came in various guises as well. In the early 1920s, it was actually pulled by a star rather than reindeer in some cases. The habit of writing to him really boomed in the interwar period. So the writing to Father Christmas had started in the Victorian period, but by the time of the interwar period, children were going to school until the age of 14. So everybody could read and write, or most people could read and write, and this encouraged children to write to Father Christmas. He'd also become a presence in department stores prior to the First World War, but after the First World War, his presence really grew and became more extravagant. So this is an image of Father Christmas in Selfridges, and you can see that he's got this fabulous styled sort of stone-looking cave or grotto behind him. In 1921, at Whiteley's, children rode on a submarine to go and visit Santa in Toyland. And Bentals of Kingston, who were never shy of a gimmick to drag people into their stores, also had a circus, a Christmas circus alongside Father Christmas. So you could visit lions, tigers and things like that at the same time as the man himself. So, as we've seen in a lot of this talk, Christmas in the 1930s didn't necessarily, the 20s and 30s didn't necessarily make use of newly emerging forms of art, style and design. A lot of it reached back to the Victorian and Edwardian period. But today, the 1920s and 30s are long enough ago for them to have become our traditions. And so what happened then has been incorporated into our Christmases, and Art Deco in particular has this glitz and glamour, which is perfect for the festive period. But of course, time has passed since the 1920s and 30s, and Art Deco has been filtered through technology and changes in taste and design. So what we have is interpretations of Art Deco when we're looking at modern festive Art Deco. These things might not appeal to purists, but they are certainly popular with consumers because stores keep rolling them out year after year. So if we look at this image just as an example of interpretations of Art Deco and how it can be used, obviously we have the sort of classic 1920s tub chair, which has been revamped in boucle, but we've also got the curves of the table and the straight, streamlined straight edges. The folding paper ornaments, for me, give these great geometric shapes, which again we see a lot in Art Deco. And also the very neutral colour palette is very reminiscent of those all white painted buildings that we see a lot in Art Deco architecture. So if we move on to decorations themselves, these are all decorations that were available in the shops this year. I can't remember where from, they're from a variety of places, but again, we see Art Deco being used. So it ranges from the what I term a Gatsby-esque deco with the dark tones, the black and the gold on the bauble on the bottom left. And then the Merry Christmas sign uses the modern Art Deco sans serif fonts for this very simple sort of sign. The bird in the center is a really interesting one. It's a very stripped back figure of the bird, and it's also in motion. And this was stripped back and moving figures were really popular, particularly in Art Deco sculpture. The silver wreath, the mistletoe is incredibly stripped back, and for me it actually reminds me a lot of the silver holly leaves that we saw earlier in the presentation. And again, we have the folding paper Christmas tree with its lovely lines. If you want to deck out your home in Art Deco, tableware, barware, etc., it's very easy. Cocktail glasses are, the coupe shape in particular, are definitely having a moment this year. There are loads of them in the shops. To a lesser extent, cocktail shakers and accessories, but this Von Chef cocktail shaker in the middle is definitely pulling on Art Deco forms with this dark box, the gold lines, and also the gold bronze finish on the goods themselves. Christmas crackers are doing the same. It's very luxury sort of a deco look. I put the candlestick on because for me those lines, the ribs on it, are very reminiscent of the scalloped light fittings that you often found in Art Deco buildings, particularly cinemas. And the tray and the cocktail picks are just this very simple stripped back look that you find a lot in Art Deco as well. You can also wrap any gifts you buy, and in Art Deco sort of wrapping paper and things like that, and send Art Deco Christmas cards, which you see on the top right. I particularly love, it's not Art Deco as such, but I do particularly love this wrapping paper with these wonderful fashionable ladies on. I would love all my gifts to be wrapped in this year. Incidentally, it was Woolworths who introduced patterned wrapping paper, and that as they introduced it, so brown paper and string became sort of more and more unfashionable, and we've been left with all the fabulous decorated wrapping paper and ribbons that we have today. So I hope this has left you feeling quite festive, and also given you a little bit of a look at how Art Deco is used at Christmas time. So it's pulling on all those sort of metallics and neutrals and things that give us a real sense of luxury, I think, in a lot of these modern interpretations, you know, and Art Deco in its modern form definitely has this. Just as people did in the interwar period, we want to treat ourselves at Christmas, we want to enjoy ourselves, and then surrounding ourselves with lavish surroundings and beautifully wrapped gifts, you know, definitely helps with that. And I think that's why Art Deco can be used so successfully at Christmas. But I thought, as a sort of final wrap up, I thought I would share some of the gifts that the Art Deco Society Committee would love to receive if practicalities and money were no object. I'm going to ask you to put any suggestions that you may have in the chat box at the end, so get your thinking caps on if you can think of any wonderful Art Deco or 1920s and 30s gifts that you would like to receive.
Emma?
Yes?
Apparently the chat box isn't working.
Oh, can we use
the Q&A section is, so if everyone just pops it in there, that would be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Either works. Thank you.
Well, there are a few questions.
Oh, can I finish off first?
Oh, sorry. I thought
Don't worry. So going back to this, I asked the Art Deco Society Committee what they would love to receive for Christmas if practicality and money was no object. And I gave them my example to start with, and I would love to receive Island. For those of you who don't know what this is, it's a private island off the coast of Devon with this beautiful gem of an Art Deco hotel. Agatha Christie stayed there numerous times, and it inspired a couple of her books, and it's been used by ITV's Poirot for a couple of their episodes. It was on sale a couple of years ago. It didn't sell, but it was on sale for 15 million. So if any of you want to dig down the back of your sofas and buy me this, I'm perfectly happy with that. Valentina, our lovely communications person who sends out the monthly email and does all of the social media, would love to receive this stunning Cartier watch from 1925. Cocktail watches became really popular in the interwar period because women's clothes became quite fragile, and they weren't as robust as sort of older clothing seen in the Edwardian period. So a fob watch was simply too heavy for clothing. So watches migrated to the wrist, and watches became a piece of jewelry in themselves, as you can see with this. Cartier was and still is one of the most sought after names in cocktail watches, and they actually created the square face on a watch. They were the first to innovate it, and it actually had to have special watch mechanism designed for it by the Swiss watchmaker Jaeger-LeCoultre. This is a particularly lovely example of a watch, or it must be, because it's price on application, so I don't know how much this one is. Paul, one of our committee members, says that he would love to receive the De La Warr Pavilion in Bexhill-on-Sea. This was designed by, gosh, the names escape me, I need to look them up, Eric Mendelsohn and Serge Chermayeff in the classic international style. And it's been used as a TV location. It's one of Britain's most iconic Art Deco buildings. Interestingly enough, it was actually officially opened on the 12th of December 1935. So it was sort of like an early Christmas present to the people of Bexhill. Lucy, our Art Deco Society president, would like to, oh, sorry, that's not working. Oh no, you can't see this properly now. I'm sorry. Behind the large bow is the foyer of the Strand Palace Hotel. So this, I don't know whether Lucy wants to raid the archives or go back in time to get this. It's a tricky one because it's no longer in situ. It was designed by Oliver Bernard and installed in 1930. Bernard was a set designer for theatre and film, and you can see this really in this design for the foyer behind the bow. Apologise. What you can't see here is the colour. So it was pink marble, limestone floors, lots of chrome and glass and mirrors accenting it. It was actually ripped out of the hotel in 1969 and sent to the V&A, where it languished in a warehouse many years until it was fully restored about 15-20 years ago. And finally, Lauren has more modest taste than the rest of us, I think, but great taste, I would say. This is a diamond and sapphire brooch that is in a shop in Manchester that she frequently walks past and stares into the window and dreams of having. I think this is really lovely. So that brings me to the end of my talk. I hope you've enjoyed it. It would be great to hear any of your requests for what you'd like to hear for Christmas, have for Christmas. I'm also open to try and answer any of your questions, but like I said at the start, I'm absolutely not an expert on Christmas, but I will do my best. So with that, I will say cheers, my drink that I haven't drunk because I've been talking too much. Thank you very much for listening, and of course, Merry Christmas.
Thank you so much, Emma. We do have a couple.
Okay.
Jackie says that she'd love a Lalique perfume bottle. And I must say, I actually quite like one of those as well. And Jane says that she says, I so would like that child's Art Deco house, the
it's
doll's
lovely,
house.
isn't it?
Could play with that for hours, imagining myself living in it. I think it was pretty special.
It was. I have to say, those two images I think were both taken off eBay. So
were they?
Yeah, they weren't for sale at the moment, but those houses do come up for sale. I don't know how much they are though.
Well, we'll all keep our eyes peeled.
Yeah, absolutely.
Duncan left a comment that the Christmas fair for the Empire artwork is marvelous. I think it was beautiful, actually. The little village.
Yes, yeah, the shopping village. It's lovely, isn't it?
Leslie does have a question, but I don't know whether, I'm not sure whether we'll be able to answer this. She said, why do they call it Santa's Grotto? Where does the idea of a grotto or cave come from?
Do you know what? I have no idea, because I really don't know. I went to Finland with my children a few years ago, and Father Christmas was definitely sitting in a wooden chalet, and I know that was the real Father Christmas. So, you know, he's normally in a chalet, not or in a little wooden hut, not in a grotto. So I don't know. I'm afraid I don't know. There will be a reason, though.
Yeah. Actually, I've got a comment. I was thinking how these days everybody seems to be complaining that Christmas starts too early, but you pointed out that one of the department stores, was it Gamages, started in November.
A lot
with
of
their, was it Gamages?
A lot of department stores started early. In fact, a small plug for myself here. I was actually quoted in the Times. The journalist asked me about this because he had the same thing. You know, is Christmas getting earlier? And actually, I think it was in 1933. It was reported that the Queen had actually started her Christmas shopping on the 30th of October. And
okay, so it's not new. It's nothing new.
And again, Selfridges were opening up, and the other big department stores were opening their Christmas sections at the start of November. So although we feel it's a creep, I'm not sure it is. What I do think, though, is that there is more Christmas around now, so it feels like it's getting earlier. I think that's why.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Right. Dara says, just fabulous, Emma. Thank you so much. Such an engaging and informative talk. Loved it. Lucy says there are some great Triang modern houses, great pictures online. She just found one sold for £300 at an auction in 2020. Yeah, Claire says, thank you, Emma. Really interesting. Agree, Bear Island would be wonderful. As someone brought up in Bexhill in the 70s, the De La War was the venue for my teen discos, so somehow never seems as special.
I think Paul might disagree with that.
Yeah.
He thinks it's special.
I think that's it with the questions and comments. So thank you so much.
No problem.
It's been marvellous. I think it sets everyone up for Christmas.
I hope so.
Very lovely seasonal talk, and great to see about the history of it, but also the influences today in our wrapping paper and decorations, etc. Really, that style really does lend itself to Christmas.
It does.
Okay, so if anyone would like to rewatch tonight's webinar, you'll all be sent a Vimeo link in a day or so. Quick reminder, don't forget to fill in and return your feedback form. This will automatically enter you into the draw to win a free ticket for the January talk. Speaking of which, this will take place on Thursday, the 16th of January at 7:30, and our speaker will be Dr. Catherine Ferry, who chaired both of our dive-in events earlier this year. Catherine will be speaking about the Empire exhibitions, largely forgotten events, which were held in Wembley in 1924 and 1925. And these hinted at what was to come with the Paris Exposition of 1925. And so this talk will be a fantastic way to kick off Art Deco Centenary year and all the centenary celebrations for 2025. We have an amazing in-person event in Liverpool lined up. Full details are on the website. But briefly, this will consist of a series of events. You can pick and choose which you want to attend or come to all of it. And it will include talks, tours, dance classes, an afternoon tea dance, a cocktail party, and last but not least, the Centenary Ball with dinner and live music. And this will all take place at the Crown Plaza, John Lennon Airport, a Grade 2 listed Art Deco hotel, on 29th and 30th of March. So please see our website for details. It's going to be really special. Talking of Christmas presents, if you'd like to treat yourself or a loved one to membership of the Art Deco Society, it's just £15 a year for one person or £25 for a couple. So now it only remains for me to wish everyone a very happy Christmas and New Year, and to say see you in January. Thank you very much.